Lyra sat alone again. The rain was soft and steady, streaking down the translucent domes of Zephyra like silver threads. She loved this time of day, when the city seemed quiet, and the glowing gardens reflected in the wet crystal floors. Most Zephyrians were busy in their work or attending social functions, but Lyra preferred to be alone. It was easier to think without interruptions, easier to focus on her research. Her long fingers traced the edges of a small crystal plant, watching tiny droplets cling to its leaves. The air smelled fresh with a hint of the wet earth beneath the gardens. Lyra always thought the smell reminded her of something lost, something far away she could not quite name. Her violet eyes stared at the horizon, where the floating city seemed to meet the storm clouds, but the calm she felt was fragile. She was intelligent, respected for her work on Zephyra's atmospheric systems, but that respect often came with fear. Other aliens found her strange, her curiosity unbounded, her ways unpredictable. And so she was alone. Tonight, as she watched the rain, she sensed someone approach. At first, she thought it was another researcher, a Zephyrian colleague come to discuss the new energy readings from the lower sectors. But when she glanced sideways, she saw a figure not like the others. He was human. Lyra's first reaction was surprise. Humans were rare here, usually seen in the controlled zones of the city where their technology could be monitored. They did not usually venture into the floating gardens without supervision. He looked ordinary in his own way, tall with dark hair damp from the rain, eyes that seemed to carry curiosity rather than fear or judgment. He walked slowly, respectfully, as if entering sacred space. Without a word, he lowered himself onto the bench beside her. Lyra stiffened. She had never sat next to a human before, not without the presence of authority figures or other aliens. His presence was unusual but oddly comforting. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The rain pattered softly on the crystal domes, and the gardens glowed in quiet blues and greens, reflecting in their eyes. Then, unexpectedly, he whispered, "You smell like earth after rain." Lyra blinked. She turned to him, unsure if she had heard correctly. Humans often spoke strangely, their words carrying meanings that were different from Zephyrian language. But these words, they were simple, gentle, and somehow familiar. I do?" she asked, her voice soft, unsure. He nodded, smiling faintly, eyes following the droplets as they traced lines along the domes. "It's a niceme," he said. "It reminds me of home." Lyra considered this. Humans did not usually speak like this to her. Most were practical, focused on tasks or data. But this human, Marcus, as she learned his name, had a calmness about him, a curiosity not just about Zephyra, but about life itself. There was no judgment, no superiority, just observation and interest. "I have never smelled rain like earth before," she admitted. "But perhaps it is like what you describe." Her voice was hesitant but warm. He nodded again. "It's a simple thing, really. But it matters. Sometimes the small things remind you why you explore, why you learn." Lyra considered this carefully. The small things. Yes, she had been so focused on her research that she had almost forgotten the simple pleasures of her world. The way rain smelled against crystal leaves, the glimmer of bioluminescent moss in wet light, the way air carried sounds differently when storms came. Marcus's words brought those pleasures back to her, like a gentle awakening. For a while, they just sat together watching the rain. Marcus did not try to fill the silence with chatter. He only observed, occasionally pointing out something small, a ripple in a pond, a floating garden leaf, the way the light reflected on crystal towers. Lyra found herself explaining things she had never explained to anyone before. The way certain plants absorbed moisture, the history of the crystal domes, the subtle dances of energy in the floating city. Marcus listened. Truly listened. He asked questions not for test or challenge, but out of curiosity. And Lyra found herself responding in ways she had never allowed herself to respond before. She laughed softly when he mispronounced a Zephyrian word. She smiled when he made simple observations about the rain. For the first time in a long time, she felt normal. The rain grew heavier. Zephyra's floating city responded. Some crystals glowed brighter, some gardens shimmered with extra luminescence, and the air seemed alive. Lyra breathed in deeply. The scent of the wet moss, the rain, and the distant ocean filled her senses. And then she realized something startling. Marcus had made that moment feel different. The rain did not just fall. It connected them. "Why are you here?" she asked. curiosity overcoming her usual caution. Marcus looked out at the horizon. I wanted to see Zephyra differently, he said. Not as a human explorer, not as someone with orders. I wanted to see it like you see it, to understand it. Lyra turned her head slightly, studying him. Humans often had simple goals, but Marcus's words carried depth. He wanted to understand, not just to report. That desire, it was familiar, like something in her own mind mirrored it. She felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this human could be more than a visitor. Perhaps he could be a friend or even something closer, though she did not yet know what that meant. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. Time felt different in the rain-soaked gardens. Lyra realized she was no longer anxious about being alone. She was not only with someone, she was with someone who cared to notice the small, overlooked parts of the world. Then Marcus shifted slightly and pointed to a crystal flower, its petals refracting the raindrops into tiny prisms. Do you think it knows the rain feels different tonight? He asked softly. Lyra laughed, a light musical sound that surprised her. Perhaps it does, she said. Perhaps every drop tells a story it cannot speak. He smiled, and she realized she wanted to hear more of his words. To see more of his reactions. To feel the quiet presence he offered. Something warm spread in her chest. A feeling she had thought impossible after years of isolation. The rain finally began to ease, thinning into gentle mist. Zephyra's gardens reflected a softer glow, and the city seemed peaceful once more. Marcus looked at Lyra and said quietly, I will come again, if you will allow me. Lyra felt her heart flutter. Yes, she said. You may. As he stood to leave, he glanced back once, eyes meeting hers. That small human gesture, the smile, the nod, the simple recognition of her, left her staring after him long after he walked away. She realized that for the first time in years she did not feel the weight of being alone. She felt the possibility of connection. Lyra stayed in the gardens long after Marcus left, listening to the gentle drip of rain from the leaves, breathing in the scent of the wet earth and crystal flowers. For the first time, the rain felt like a companion rather than just a backdrop. She thought of Marcus's words again. You smell like earth after rain. And somehow, in a way she could not yet understand, it felt like a gift. Tonight she would not be alone. Not completely. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could look forward to tomorrow. The next morning, Lyra woke before dawn. The city of Zephyra was quiet, the floating towers gleaming faintly under the first light of the twin suns. She moved through her private chambers, her mind still lingering on the human from last night. Marcus. She could not stop thinking about the way he had spoken, the gentle curiosity in his voice, and the way he had noticed her without judgment. It was strange, this connection. She was not used to such attention. When she arrived at the observation gardens, the air was still heavy with the remnants of rain. Mist hovered over the floating flowers, and droplets sparkled on the crystal leaves like tiny stars. Lyra wandered along the paths, touching the plants lightly, enjoying the cool, wet feel. She had a sense that today would be different. And then she saw him. Marcus stood near the edge of the gardens, looking out at the shimmering city below. He had his usual calm expression, but his eyes lit up slightly when he saw her. Without a word, he walked toward her. You came, she said softly, a hint of surprise in her voice. I promised, he replied, his tone warm and sincere. I wanted to see the gardens again, and to see you. Lyra felt a strange flutter in her chest. She nodded, unsure of what to say next. Together they walked slowly through the gardens, their steps careful on the wet crystal paths. Marcus pointed to a small pond where tiny glowing fish swam in patterns that reminded Lyra of constellations. They are beautiful, he said. Do they always glow like that? Lyra smiled. Only at certain times. The crystals above filter the sunlight differently each day, and the water reacts to the energy in the air. She paused. It is one of the things I study. Most Zephyrians do not pay attention to these details. They are too focused on the larger structures of the city. I notice details, Marcus said simply. I think it is important. Sometimes small things teach you more than the big things. Lyra considered this. Most of her colleagues spent time talking about projects, politics, or resources. Marcus talked differently. He noticed things. He listened. That mattered more than she realized. They wandered farther into the gardens. Lyra showed him plants that glowed faintly when touched, stones that hummed softly with energy, and flowers that changed colors depending on the angle of light. Marcus asked questions that were simple but thoughtful. Lyra found herself explaining more than she usually would, sharing secrets of Zephyra that she had never told another being. "You see the world in a unique way," Marcus said quietly. "You notice things most people ignore. It is rare." Lyra paused, thinking about his words. Rare. She had always felt different, and sometimes it had been lonely. But here was someone who not only noticed her differences but appreciated them. That realization made her feel lighter, almost as if the weight of isolation was lifting even just a little. Hours passed. The twin suns climbed higher, warming the gardens and evaporating the lingering mist. Yet neither Lyra nor Marcus seemed to care about the time. They moved slowly, deliberately, as if the world itself had paused for them. Then Lyra's communicator chimed. She glanced at it reluctantly. A message from the council flashed on the screen. They wanted to discuss her observations from the previous atmospheric storm. Normally, this would mean a long, formal meeting filled with protocols and tension, but Marcus simply nodded. "Go," he said. "I will be here when you return." "I want to see the gardens again later." Lyra hesitated. She rarely left anyone behind. But there was something comforting in his calm presence, even in absence. "I will be back," she said, and with that she left for her duties. The council chamber was cold and formal, filled with towering Zephyrian officials. Lyra presented her findings with precision, explaining the new patterns in the weather system and how the floating gardens were affected. She spoke clearly, but her mind occasionally wandered to Marcus, and she felt a small smile tug at her lips. The council noticed, of course, and several members raised their antennae in mild irritation. "Your observations are useful," one of them said, "but your focus on minor details is unusual. Why do you spend so much time on these gardens when the city's infrastructure requires attention?" Lyra straightened. "Understanding small systems helps us manage larger ones," she replied. "The gardens are not just decoration. They affect the air quality, the energy flow, and the stability of our city. Ignoring them could create problems we cannot predict," the council murmured. Some seemed impressed, others skeptical. Lyra returned to her quarters with mixed feelings. She had defended her work, but she could feel the council's subtle disapproval of her friendship with a human. When she returned to the gardens, Marcus was waiting as promised. He smiled when he saw her, and for a moment the weight of the council's criticism faded. "You handled them well," Marcus said quietly. "I saw the transmission from here." Lyra shook her head, smiling faintly. "I do not think they understand." "Perhaps they never will." Marcus studied her for a moment. "Some things are worth sharing even if others do not understand. And some things are worth protecting even if others question it." Lyra felt warmth spread through her chest. He always had a way of saying simple words that carried more meaning than long explanations ever could. Together they walked to a secluded section of the garden, where the air shimmered with energy from the crystal flowers. "I want to show you something," Lyra said, leading him to a hidden alcove. Inside, delicate vines wound around glowing stones and a small waterfall trickled into a crystal basin. The air smelled sweet and fresh, a mix of rain and blossoms. Marcus knelt beside the basin, dipping a hand into the water. "It is incredible," he said. "I have never seen anything like this on Earth." Lyra smiled. "It is one of the secrets of Zephyra. Few come here. Most do not even know it exists." He looked at her, eyes bright with curiosity. "Thank you for showing me. I feel lucky to see it." For the first time, Lyra felt truly understood. Marcus did not just see the gardens. He saw her. He appreciated her world, her knowledge, and her presence. She realized that she wanted to spend more time with him, to share more of herself, even though it went against the cautious habits she had maintained for years. They stayed in the alcove for hours, talking quietly. Marcus shared stories of Earth, how rain smelled after summer storms, how forests thrived in the rain, and how people sometimes paused to simply watch the sky. Lyra listened, fascinated by the differences and similarities. She felt a bridge forming between their worlds, built on curiosity and quiet understanding. As the suns began to set, casting long shadows across the floating city, Lyra and Marcus sat together, watching the colors change in the sky. The rain began again, gentle at first, then stronger. Droplets danced on the crystal leaves, sparkling like tiny lights. Marcus leaned slightly closer, not touching her but sharing her space. "You smell like earth after rain," he whispered again just as he had the first night. Lyra looked at him, heart beating faster. This time the words were no longer just an observation. They were a connection, a shared feeling, a bridge between her lonely world and the human she had come to trust. She smiled softly, letting the moment linger. For the first time, Lyra did not feel alone in the rain. She had Marcus by her side, a presence that was patient, curious, and kind. And as the rain washed over Zephyra, she realized something important. She did not have to face the world alone anymore. There were other beings who could understand her, who could share her life, who could make the small wonders of her world even more meaningful. And in that quiet, glowing garden, two worlds began to meet. One violet-eyed alien, one curious human, both discovering that friendship, trust, and wonder could bloom in the smallest of moments. The following days passed quickly, yet each one felt brighter than the last for Lyra. She no longer walked into the observation gardens with the heavy weight of loneliness. Now she stepped in expecting to see Marcus, and almost always he was there. Sometimes he was waiting for her, sitting quietly near the pond. Other times he appeared later, walking with slow, steady steps as though he wanted her to notice the world before she noticed him. Their talks grew longer. Lyra explained the delicate systems that kept Zephyra's floating city alive. She showed him how crystal towers absorbed energy from the storms, and how the gardens filtered air. Marcus listened intently, asking questions that surprised her with their depth. In return, Marcus told her stories of Earth, vast forests, mountains covered with snow, oceans that stretched beyond sight. "Earth is rough," Marcus said one evening as they sat near the glowing waterfall. "But it feels alive in a way I cannot explain. Zephyra is beautiful, like art. Earth is wild, like it never wants to be tamed." Lyra tilted her head, thoughtful. "Maybe both are needed. Beauty and wildness, order and chaos balance." Marcus smiled at her answer, and Lyra realized she had never felt so comfortable sharing her thoughts with anyone before. But their peaceful days did not last unchallenged. The council had begun to notice her frequent absence from official gatherings, and whispers spread through Zephyra's high chambers. Some of her peers wondered why she spent so much time with a human explorer. Humans were welcome as guests, yes, but not trusted as equals. Old fears still lingered. One evening after leaving Marcus, Lyra was summoned to the council chambers. The tall crystalline walls glowed faintly, casting pale light on the stern faces of the elders. "You have been distracted," one elder said, their voice cool. "Your attention is fixed on a human when your duty is to this city." Lyra kept her voice steady. "My duty is to protect Zephyra. And in Marcus I have found someone who notices things even we overlook. He has insight. His questions lead to discoveries. Or to danger," another counselor replied. "Humans are reckless. You risk too much trust." Lyra lowered her gaze for a moment. She could not deny the risk. Yet when she thought of Marcus, the way he listened, the way he respected her world, she felt certain he was different. "He seeks to understand, not to harm," she said. The council dismissed her with warnings, but the message was clear. Her bond with Marcus was being watched. When she told Marcus about the council's concern, he did not seem angry or afraid. Instead, he looked out at the gardens and said quietly, "They are right to be careful. But fear can blind people to what they most need." Lyra nodded, her chest tightening. "I do not want to lose what we have," she admitted softly. "You will not," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "Not unless you choose to." Those words stayed with her. Days later, something unexpected happened. While walking with Marcus through the southern edge of the gardens, they discovered an unusual structure, half hidden beneath the crystal vines. It was old, older than the city itself, its edges worn smooth by centuries of rain and storms. Strange markings lined the stone, glowing faintly with a power neither of them could identify. Lyra knelt beside the markings, tracing them with her fingers. "This is ancient," she whispered. "I have seen references to something like this in old records, but I thought it was myth. A network beneath Zephyra, built long before our city rose." Marcus crouched beside her. "It looks almost human," he said quietly. She looked at him, startled. "Human? How could humans have been here before?" Marcus shrugged slightly, but his eyes were serious. "When I studied old Earth archives, there were fragments, stories of alliances with distant worlds. Maybe this is proof." Maybe our worlds touched long ago. Lyra's heart raced. Could it be true? Could humans and Zephyrians have once worked together? The thought filled her with both wonder and unease. If such a bond existed in the past, why had it been forgotten? Why had it been buried? Together they cleared more of the vines, revealing patterns of crystal that pulsed faintly with energy. The air grew heavier, humming as if alive. Lyra felt her skin tingle. Marcus reached out, brushing the stone gently, and the markings glowed brighter. The stone responded to him. Lyra gasped. It knows you. Marcus frowned, uncertain. Or it remembers humans. For a long moment they stared at the ancient structure, neither speaking. Then Marcus said softly, "Maybe this is why we met. Maybe we are supposed to discover this together." Lyra felt a shiver run through her, not from fear but from the weight of possibility. That night, she dreamed of rain falling through crystal towers, of humans and Zephyrians walking side by side, building something greater than either could alone. The next day they returned to study the structure. Lyra translated parts of the markings, her knowledge of old texts guiding her. The words spoke of storms, survival, and cooperation, a forgotten alliance. Marcus offered his own insights, comparing the symbols to Earth patterns. Piece by piece the message became clear. The structure was part of a network designed to stabilize Zephyra's atmosphere. Created by two species, Zephyrian and human. "It means we worked together before," Lyra whispered, awe in her voice. "Our people and yours. We saved this world once." Marcus smiled softly. "Then maybe we can again." But their discovery did not remain secret for long. The council soon learned of it, and their reaction was not what Lyra hoped. "You went into forbidden areas," one elder said harshly. "You uncovered things not meant to be touched." Lyra defended herself. "The network is part of our survival. We cannot ignore it." Marcus helped me understand what even we had forgotten. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. They did not want to admit weakness, nor did they want to credit a human. "You endanger us with this." "Partnership," one said firmly. "Cease your explorations with him." Lyra's chest tightened. She wanted to obey, but something inside her resisted. The discovery mattered too much. Marcus mattered too much. That evening, when she told Marcus what had happened, he only sighed. They will not accept the truth easily. But the truth does not disappear just because someone fears it. Lyra looked at him, torn between duty and trust. "What should I do?" "Do what feels right," Marcus said. "Not what they tell you. If this network is real, then Zephyra's future may depend on it. And maybe on us." Lyra's heart ached, but she knew he was right. She could not turn away from what they had found. She could not turn away from him. That night, as rain fell again across Zephyra, they met once more in the hidden alcove. The air was cool, filled with the sound of droplets striking crystal leaves. Marcus leaned close, his voice barely a whisper. "You smell like earth after rain," he said again. But this time it was not just a memory of home. It was a promise, a reminder of the bond they had begun to build. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words sink deep into her heart. She knew the days ahead would not be easy. The council was watching. The city was fragile, and the secrets beneath Zephyra were dangerous. But with Marcus by her side, she no longer felt alone. Together they would face whatever storms came. The days passed slowly, yet each one brought new threads to the strange bond between Arya and Daniel. What had begun as a single whispered line, "You smell like earth after rain," was now a connection that neither of them could easily name. Arya still sat alone in the quiet corners of the academy. But now she was never truly alone. Daniel always found her. Sometimes he would sit in silence beside her, offering no words, only presence. Other times he spoke about Earth, describing rivers, forests, and skies full of storm clouds. His words painted pictures that she had never seen, yet could almost feel. The other students noticed. Whispers moved through the academy halls. Many aliens from different species wondered why a human was spending so much time with a girl who had no friends. Some thought Daniel was wasting his time. Others thought Arya was strange and not worth anyone's attention. But Daniel did not care. And slowly Arya began to realize she did not care either. One evening, the academy's sky dome projected an artificial sunset. The light spread across the silver walls and glass panels of the courtyard. Arya sat there, her arms wrapped around her knees, while Daniel leaned back with his hands resting behind him. "Tell me," he said suddenly, "why do you always sit alone?" Arya's golden eyes narrowed slightly. She did not answer right away. For a long moment, she only listened to the hum of the dome's energy field and the faint laughter of students far away. Finally, she said in a quiet voice, "Because I do not belong. I am different. Even among my own kind, I do not fit. My thoughts, my silence, my way of feeling, it makes others uneasy." Daniel studied her carefully. "Different doesn't mean wrong," he said softly. Arya turned her head toward him, her expression unreadable. "You say that because you are human. Humans always try to shape the world into their own meaning. But here difference is seen as weakness." Daniel leaned closer, his voice lower now. "Then maybe the others are blind. Sometimes the rarest things are the ones worth noticing." Arya felt a strange warmth inside her. She had never heard words like his before. She did not know how to answer, so she remained quiet. But something inside her shifted. The Academy was preparing for the upcoming Unity Festival, an event where students from many worlds would display their culture, talents, and history. It was meant to celebrate diversity, but for Arya, it always meant more isolation. She had no songs to sing, no dances to perform, no stories her people would accept her telling. On the day of the festival, the great hall of the Academy was filled with glowing banners, music from a dozen instruments, and voices in countless languages. Students wore traditional garments, each proud of their heritage. Arya stood in the corner, her hands hidden in the sleeves of her robe. She watched the colors and sounds swirl around her like waves she could not enter. She was ready to slip away when Daniel found her again. "You're not going to join?" he asked. She shook her head. "There is nothing for me here." Daniel smiled, a spark in his eyes. "Then make something." She blinked, confused. "Make something?" "Yes," he said, nodding. "On Earth, when we don't have a tradition, we create one. We sing even if we don't know the song. We dance even if we don't know the steps." "Why not now?" Arya frowned. "That is foolish." "Maybe," Daniel admitted with a grin. "But foolishness is sometimes the beginning of something beautiful." Before she could protest, he reached for her hand. For a moment, Arya froze. No one touched her. No one dared. But his hand was warm, steady, real. She did not pull away. Daniel led her to the center of the hall where other students were showing their cultural performances. Some turned to watch, curious. Arya's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to run, but Daniel raised his voice. "This is Arya," he announced, "and today we bring something new. Something that does not belong to any world yet, but maybe belongs to all." The hall grew silent. Arya's throat tightened. She had no idea what to do, but Daniel squeezed her hand and whispered, "Close your eyes. Just follow me." He began to move slow and steady like a dance. Not elegant, not practiced, just steps and turns, guided by rhythm only he could hear. At first Arya stumbled, her movements stiff. But then, as the music around them swelled, she allowed herself to follow. Her golden eyes softened and her steps grew lighter. The two of them moved in circles, weaving through the hall like threads of a new pattern. They had no rhythm that matched the others, yet something about it felt alive. Some students began to clap along, uncertain but curious. Others leaned in, fascinated. When the dance ended, silence fell again. Then a single clap rose, followed by another, and then the hall filled with applause. Arya stood frozen, her chest rising and falling quickly. She had never felt eyes on her without judgment. She had never heard approval from a crowd. Daniel leaned close and whispered, "See, you belong, even if you think you don't." Her throat tightened, and for the first time in her life, she smiled. Later that night, Arya walked alone under the Academy dome. The stars above were artificial projections, but they felt real enough. She replayed the dance again and again in her mind. The way Daniel had not cared for rules. The way he had made space for her to be seen. Her steps slowed as she realized something heavy and strange. She did not just feel grateful. She felt drawn to him in a way she could not explain. His presence was like the scent of rain he had once mentioned. Fresh, grounding, impossible to ignore. But fear coiled in her chest. She had always been alone. To need someone else was dangerous. What if it was taken away? What if he left like all the others? Her thoughts were interrupted by a shadow moving at the edge of the courtyard. A tall alien figure stepped out from behind one of the silver pillars. His eyes glowed faintly, his voice sharp. "So this is why the human wastes his time," the figure said. "Dancing with the one who does not belong." Arya stiffened. It was Sirach, one of the elite students from a powerful clan. He had mocked her before, but never so directly. "Leave," she said firmly, though her voice shook slightly. Serac laughed. "Or what, you will dance me away?" Before Arya could answer, another voice cut in. "She doesn't have to," Daniel said, stepping out of the shadows behind her. His tone was calm, but his eyes were steady, unshaken. "You heard her. Leave," Serac sneered. "And what will a human do if I don't?" Daniel did not move closer, but his presence was solid as stone. "Then you'll find out why humans are never wise to provoke." The air between them grew tense. Arya looked from one to the other, fear tightening her chest. She had always endured insults in silence. But now Daniel stood beside her, refusing to let her carry it alone. For the first time, she felt something deeper than fear. She felt safe. That night, as they finally walked back toward the dorms, Arya glanced at Daniel and whispered, "Why do you keep standing beside me?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Because you smell like earth after rain, and because no one should ever sit alone forever." Arya turned away quickly, hiding the warmth that rose in her chest. She did not answer, but she knew. Something was changing. Inside her, between them, and perhaps even in the academy itself. And though she did not yet understand where it would lead, she knew one truth. She was no longer alone. The academy settled into silence after the festival, but the memory of Daniel and Arya's strange dance did not fade. Students whispered about it in the corridors, some mocking, others curious. But many were simply impressed that Arya had stood in the center for once instead of the shadows. For Arya, the moment had left a mark far deeper than she could admit. She replayed it endlessly in her mind. The warmth of Daniel's hand, the sound of clapping that followed, the way her heart had felt lighter, even if only for a short time, yet the peace did not last. Serac, the elite student who had confronted them, was not one to forget humiliation. His pride was too heavy, his name too important. To him, Daniel was an outsider, and Arya was already someone beneath notice. The idea that they could stand in the middle of the great hall and draw the crowd's applause burned him like fire, and so he planned. The chance came 2 days later during combat training. The academy had a simulation chamber where students tested their skills in virtual battles. Though no one could truly be harmed inside, the intensity was real. It was there that Serac chose to make his move. The match began as usual, with students paired off into teams. Arya and Daniel were assigned together, facing 3 opponents, Serac among them. The battlefield shimmered to life, a rocky canyon under a burning sky. The air was thick with heat, the ground cracked and uneven. "Stay close," Daniel told Arya as they took cover behind a ridge. She nodded, her golden eyes focused. Though she had little combat skill compared to the others, she trusted him. The battle began with flashes of light and the hum of energy weapons. Daniel moved with surprising precision, his human instincts sharp. While the others fought with predictable patterns, Daniel improvised. He ducked under blasts, threw sand to blind, and used the canyon walls as cover in ways the simulation designers had not expected. Arya tried to keep up, but soon Serac forced her into a corner. His figure loomed over her, weapon raised. "Out of the way, Shadow Girl," he sneered. "This is between me and your human." Arya froze. Memories of years of isolation pressed on her. She wanted to fight back, but her hands shook. At that instant, Daniel appeared, sliding between them. He blocked Serac's strike with his own blade, the clash sparking against the simulated air. "You want me?" Daniel said, his voice steady. "Then face me." The duel that followed silenced the entire chamber. Serac was strong, skilled, and trained in the techniques of his clan. But Daniel fought with something Serac did not understand. Humans, he realized, did not fight for victory alone. They fought for meaning, for someone, for something that mattered. Every strike Daniel made was not just defense, but protection. Every move was sharp, fueled not by pride, but by resolve. He remembered Earth's storms, the way his people always stood again no matter how hard they were struck. And now in this strange academy, he fought with that same unshaken will. The clash of blades echoed. Sparks filled the air. Serac pushed harder, but Daniel would not fall. Arya watched, her heart racing. She had never seen anyone fight like this, not for themselves, but for another. And as she watched, a realization struck her. Daniel was not only standing beside her, he was teaching her what it meant to stand too. Something inside her shifted. Her fear began to burn away, replaced by a quiet strength. She lifted her own weapon, her hand steadier than before. When Serac tried to strike Daniel from behind, she stepped forward and blocked it, her golden eyes blazing. "Enough," she said, her voice carrying louder than she thought possible. The other students watching from the simulation's edge fell silent. Together, Daniel and Arya stood side by side, forcing Serac back. The battle turned, and though neither Daniel nor Arya delivered the final strike, the simulation registered their teamwork as victory. The canyon dissolved, the battlefield fading into the silver walls of the chamber. The crowd erupted in noise, some in shock, others in cheers. Daniel stood breathing hard, sweat on his brow, while Arya stood tall for the first time, no longer hidden. Later, as they walked away from the chamber, Arya felt something inside her she had never felt before. Not just relief, not just safety. Pride. She glanced at Daniel, who carried himself as if nothing unusual had happened. "You fought like—" She struggled to find the right word. "Like the storms you always talk about." "Wild but alive," Daniel chuckled softly. "Storms aren't meant to be controlled. They just show you that even the sky refuses to bow." Arya tilted her head, considering his words. "And you stood for me, why?" He looked at her, his eyes calm. "Because no one deserves to fight alone, not you. Not anyone." Her chest tightened and she turned her gaze away, though a small smile touched her lips. The days that followed changed everything. Arya was no longer the girl who sat alone in the corner. Others began to greet her, not with mockery but with cautious respect. The story of the dance and the battle spread, whispered from student to student, until even the teachers looked at her differently. But more than the academy's view, it was her own view that shifted. She began to walk with her head a little higher. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was not as weak or as out of place as she had once thought, and Daniel was always there. Steady as the earth after rain, one evening, the two of them sat together at the edge of the academy dome, watching the stars shimmer overhead. They were only projections, yet tonight they felt real. Arya broke the silence. "When you first sat beside me, I thought you were foolish. No one ever did that before." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe I was foolish. But I don't regret it." She turned to him, her golden eyes shining softly. "You gave me something I never thought I would have. A place, a reason to stand. Do you know what that means to me?" Daniel shook his head. "Tell me." Arya hesitated, her voice almost a whisper. "It means I am not alone anymore." The words hung in the air, simple yet powerful. Daniel looked at her quietly for a long moment, then said, "Good, because I don't plan on leaving your side." Arya's heart raced, and for the first time she let herself believe it. The festival, the battle, the whispers, none of it mattered now. What mattered was that two unlikely souls, a human and an outcast, had found each other. Where once there had been silence and isolation, there was now connection. Where once there had been fear, there was now courage. And though the galaxy was vast and uncertain, Arya knew that as long as Daniel was beside her, she would never sit alone again. She breathed deeply, the air inside the dome cool and fresh. For the first time in her life, she understood the strange words he had spoken that first day. Yes, she did smell like earth after rain, because now, like the earth, she was alive after the storm.